All right, so what I want to start talking about is the fundamental economic concepts. The things we're going to explain here are kind of the key ideas and plus any key important facts or figures that we need to know, which luckily in this section is not too many. It's actually, I think, only one. And then maybe explain some of the economics, the concepts in a little more detail, or at least hopefully give you a better understanding of it. So the first key thing to know about economics, the thing that they will probably tell you quite a few times, is that economics, more than anything, is about making choices, right? Okay. And what this first section is going to do is going to explain to you why we have to make those choices, which we'll do here. So in a second. But if you go through that first page, page 6, well, it depends on what year we're on, right? But page 6 of the resource, there's only one key number that you'll come across here and there. They might ask on a test, they might not. Let's go ahead and let's make numbers yellow, right? The first key number here is 47,000. Which represents the number of items in a supermarket, I believe, right? Yes, different items. 47,000 different items in a supermarket. Okay, so that's really the only first thing here. And then the rest of this first page is kind of just a lot of generic stuff. So let's get though into kind of the key points. The key thing I want to talk about in this section. Let's go over to purple here, and that is going to be the basic assumptions of economics. Okay, and there are 5 of them, right? Basic assumptions of economics. So the first one is scarcity. That's got to be the first one every time, right? Okay. Basically, to keep scarcity simple enough, right, is that nothing is infinite, right? There is no such thing as infinite products, infinite goods. You cannot ever have all of it, right? That just doesn't really exist, especially when it comes to time. Time is probably the number one thing that we'd say is infinite or scarce, right? And it kind of makes everything else scarce along with it. And one thing I want to point out is the difference that we'll see here in a little bit is the difference between scarcity and a shortage. I shouldn't say a little bit. We'll see in a couple videos, right? But scarcity and shortage. Scarcity is forever, right? Right. You will always have scarcity. Right? Shortage happens when there is less of a good than usual, right? Due to some supply shock, usually, right? For example, right, you could have the OPEC oil crisis of the 1970s, right, where they basically just priced everybody out of oil, which led to just an amount of oil that nobody could really get. They embargoed the United States and stuff like that. So there's just a lack of oil, right? Another example could be maybe real estate, right? If all of a sudden that there are not enough houses for how many people want houses in a given area, that is a shortage, right? That happens in all types of markets, right? Right now, actually a perfect example right now as the coronavirus is occurring is hand sanitizer, right? That there's not enough hand sanitizer right now to have enough people to give people all the hand sanitizer they want. That's different from scarcity, which basically says you can never buy all the hand sanitizer, right? Like there's always going to be more at some point, right? And so you can't quench your desires of the amount of hand sanitizer you want, right? So I guess there's probably a second part of the scarcity idea thing. Is basically the idea that our demands are infinite, right? right? So nothing is infinite, but our demands can become infinite. So because of that, there is scarcity, right? This kind of idea that these two things don't necessarily work together is probably the big reason. And so I meant to probably put that in a different color, the word scarcity here, but that's okay. I will change it on this next one. So that leads to the second one. So one thing I do want to point out is that these things all kind of work hand in hand in a way. All five of these really kind of feed off of each other. The second one here then is the concept of let's try red. Trade-offs. Okay. Let me go ahead and at least just do that. There we go. Okay. Trade-offs, right? So trade-offs are because of scarcity, right? Because this exists right here, right? Then we have to have some sort of trade-off, right? Basically, that we have to make decisions due to scarcity, right? Have to make choices based due to scarcity, right? Have to make choices due to scarcity, which I will also underline right there. So yeah, just if you choose, to do one thing or the other, right? If you have $10, right? Are you going to, buy a video game, or are you going to go get lunch, right? You can't. That $10 doesn't infinitely move into a bunch of things. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. I'm not going to get too much into it. In fact, I'm just going to go ahead and get right into 3, which again stems from number 2, right? I need to work on my arrows, but that's all right. We'll get there. Number 3 then is opportunity cost. Now this is the hardest one of these to understand, right? In my opinion, I think especially if you're new to economics, this concept is very odd. In a lot of cases, there's actually there's this thing called utils, or how much utility you get out of something, which creates this kind of fake value set for how much you enjoy doing something. But opportunity cost is the cost of the next best alternative. Okay. Right. So let's set up a scenario here. Do we want to use the one that they're doing? Let's say you have this $10, like we just said earlier, right? So you have $10, and then you can spend that on one of two things. You can either, buy a video game. Let's say you have, the prerequisite $50 or whatever, or you can go to lunch, right, with your friends. Okay. So let's pretend that you can assign a value of happiness to each of these situations, right? Each of these scenarios, right? Let's say from the video game, you are going to get 6 points of value, right? Okay. And from going to lunch, you're going to get 4 points of value. Okay. So if you were to choose lunch, the cost of lunch then is 6 points you were losing out on, right? And if you're going to go do the video game, or buy the video game, is the 4 points that you got out on. Basically, what that's saying is that, okay, so since you're going to go to lunch instead of get this video game, you are foregoing these 6 points, which means that is the cost of going to lunch, right? Or the opportunity cost of going to lunch, right? The opportunity cost of going to lunch is getting this video game that would have gotten you 6 points. Likewise, the opportunity cost of getting the video game is that you are foregoing lunch, which is a cost of 4 points, right? Okay. And so I'm going to use this example here again in a little bit, but just know that we'll see how costs work. But generally speaking, if you just think about it logically, right, do you want a higher cost or a lower cost of the thing, right? So that is what the opportunity cost is, right? Cost of the next best alternative. So again, video game or lunch are your two decisions, right? And so something I do want to mention about economics that this resource doesn't talk about, that I think is important, is the concept of ceteris paribus. Let me redo that. That R is pretty gross. Ceteris paribus. Okay, what this means is all, oh, no, sorry. All other things held equal. Okay, so what that means is that a lot of times when we look at an example like this, people are going to want to say, well, maybe I want to do, maybe I want to go buy a book. Okay, well, we're not gonna include that, right? We're not gonna look at that because of the concept of ceteris paribus, all other things held equal. In our model here, in this model that we're creating, we only have two options. Okay. The reason that this is like this is because, as we're going to see later when we look at actual big time models, what happens is that if you look at more than one thing at a time, the entire systems that they're talking about break down very quickly. When we're going to look later, when we're going to look at demand and supply shifts in a curve, right? You don't want to try to do both at the same time because it completely throws off what could possibly happen. Okay, so and I think a big problem that people have with economics, especially in decathlon economics, is that they tend to just start really reeling off all these different potential scenarios in their heads. But if you think about this idea, ceteris paribus, the idea that everything outside of the model is being held equal, right? Don't think of anything that's not outside that model, or not inside that model, excuse me. It makes things a lot easier, right? So again, don't think about this third scenario, okay? Just foresee creating a model that only has these two. Okay, so again, the opportunity cost, though, cost the next best alternative. All right, so let's go to our fourth thing. I'm going to put it down here. We're going to see how much space we have left after this one. Okay, let me hide this thing real quick, actually. All right. So the fourth thing here is a pretty simple concept of, let me make sure I get my right color, of rationality. Okay. Rationality, you might ask. Well, what could that be? Well, it's pretty self-explanatory. Okay. Um, to make this as simple as we can, it's that everybody, all people. Let me back up here. All people make the correct cost-benefit analysis. Okay. Now, what does that mean? Well, essentially what that means is that people will act in their best interests, right? So when you do a cost-benefit analysis, right, every single time you want to make sure that you're getting the best, the most profit from your situation, right? So again, up here in this example, right, where we set up that video games are 6 points worth of value and lunch are 4 points worth of value, right? If you're making a correct cost-benefit analysis, you will choose the video game, okay, because the cost is cheaper, right? The cost is 4 points that you're losing out from going to lunch. Okay, so the idea is that people make correct cost-benefit analysis, right? It's not necessarily like calculated. It's not necessarily this big, formula. It is just that when people make decisions, that they do it in their best interest. Now, you live in the real world. You know this is definitely not true. But for economic models, this is important, right? These basic assumptions here are used to create a system of models that really helps create consistency and helps create models that can actually be useful, right? If we didn't have consumers, if we didn't have people making correct, rational decisions, then economics as a field would not exist, all right? And so that's why that happens. So before we get to our final one, right? Oops. Scarcity, right? Nothing is infinite, right? And then our demands are, right, leads to this idea that because things are infinite, or not infinite, excuse me, we have to have trade-offs, right? And we have to make choices due to scarcity. And then the question becomes, how do we decide what trade-offs to make? Well, first off, we look at our opportunity cost, which is the cost of the next best alternative. And then how do we decide, how do we make sure we choose the right trade-off based on an opportunity cost. Well, that is a rationality, right? That people make correct cost-benefit analysis or are rational actors, right? And so finally, the last one. I don't need to do that much. Let's go back. Yeah, that's good. 5, which is gains from trade. Okay. All right. Gains from trade is easy. If everyone is rational by looking at the correct opportunity cost, right? What happens is that if people exchange goods or services, then everybody benefits. So in exchange, that's poor wording. Let's go here. In exchange, let's say not say all, or not say both. Let's say all parties benefit. Okay, so if there is a scenario right here, right, where we have decided, this person decided, hey, based on my opportunity cost, I'm going to go buy this video game, right? Everybody is benefiting from because well, they have to go buy it from a store, right? So the store is getting $10, right? They are making what's considered a profit for them. The consumer here, this person is making a profit on opportunity cost because the video game is the opportunity cost of the video game is cheaper than the opportunity cost of the lunch, right? And so because of that, everybody benefits from the trade, right? But this only occurs if all of these other things occur, specifically rationality, right? If everybody's acting rationally, then we're good. If not, then all of this falls apart. Okay. So these are the 5 basic assumptions that help create the models of economics. Okay. Now, I think that's pretty simple to understand. And then let's talk about the kind of last 2 sections here. Let's start with, let's see, what color do I need? Let's start with that. Let's go up here. Yeah, let's do that. All right, so we're going to have positive and normative economics. Okay, this one's simple to understand, but I think a lot of people forget it. So let's make sure we don't. Right? Okay, so we have positive. We got normative. Okay, so positive economics is very simple. These are simply these are facts, right? These are pieces of these are statistics. These are data. These are ways to look at the world using economic analysis and just creating a sort of no nonsense answer to a question, right? No opinion at all, right? So positive economics is fact-based economics. Okay. For example, right? Hey, the price of oil will increase by 7% if you do this policy, right? That's positive economics. Pretty simple. Normative is using fact to make a decision or to kind of posit a thing that should happen, right? To create judgment, let's say, to create a judgment of the situation. Okay, so if we're using this as an example, right? If the price of oil will increase by 7% if this one thing happens, right? The normative part of this would be, therefore, you should not do that, right? So the positive is this part, the normative is the opinion, right? So, hey, this policy occurs, or sorry, this change will occur, so therefore you should or should not do this thing is the normative aspect. Okay, so it's pretty simple. It's fact and opinion, right? Kind of pretty much is the easy way to understand this, right? Let's see what they talk about in minimum wage here. right? So, the positive economics of minimum wage stuff would be things like, hey, this is going to impact, the costs of running these companies by this much. It is going to increase it's going to change the economy in these regions. It's going to increase or decrease GDP by this amount, et cetera, et cetera. Normative says, hey, should you or should you not do that policy? Okay, pretty easy. So last part here is Pareto efficiency. It talks about efficiency as a goal, I believe, is the name of the. Yeah. But we're gonna talk about this guy, Vilfredo Pareto. Now they should not ask you his years of existence, but we're gonna put it down because one thing I think a lot of people don't quite understand about decathlon, or at least decathletes don't understand about decathlon. They can ask whatever they want. They can ask literally any question. I've seen this question on several tests. Almost every year, I feel like this question is on an official USAT test at some point. Okay, Vilfredo Pareto is an economist, an Italian economist, and he was the first to make use of this concept. And basically, what Pareto efficiency is, right? I should also almost put this in red, right? I should have put it in red, really, but that's fine. Pareto efficiency is the idea that an economy is efficient when I think let's do it like this: when two things are occurring, all resources are utilized, and two, no one can gain without hurting another person. Hurting someone else. Okay. This one's pretty easy to understand once you get some examples down. So let's take a look at let's get an example here. It's very easy. Let's say there's $100 in an economy and there are 5 people in an economy. Okay, so let's create a little table. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And let's create 3 different economies here. Okay, so I'll start with an easy one. Let's say each person in this economy has $20. Okay, this is Pareto efficient. Okay, all the money is being used. There are $20. There are $20 times 5. That's $100. All the money is being used. If this person wanted $21, they'd have to take it from somebody else, which means that that this part is true, right? Nobody can gain without hurting someone else, right? So yeah, boom, done. This is a Pareto efficient economy. Secondly, let's go here. Let's go $96, and everybody else has $1 each. This is also Pareto efficient, right? There are $100, 96, 97, 98, 99, 100. There are 5 people utilizing them. All resources are utilized. No one can gain without hurting someone else. Boom, look at that. That's $100. We're good to go. Okay, so say we got our final scenario, and you're probably going to see where this is going. Let's say we have 18, 19, 20, 20, 21. Okay. Are all resources utilized? Well, I'm not much of a mathematician. That's 61. That is 80. That is $98. That seems a little short to me. That is not $100. No one can gain without hurting someone else. Can person number 1? No, let's say person number 2. Over here. Can person number 2 get a couple extra bucks? Yes, they can, because there are $98 and there are $2 left floating in the economy. So this is not Pareto efficient. Okay. So that should be pretty easy to understand once you kind of see this. I think pretty self-explanatory. Okay, and that's pretty much it for section 1. Of course, there's the micro versus macro. you'll definitely know what this is, but just in case, I'll go ahead and go over that very briefly down here. What? Yeah, okay. Microeconomics. Oops, I misspelled that. Micro. Hang on, I need to readjust my tablet because it is in a weird place to write. There we go. All right. Well, still not going much better, but that's all right. I keep on tilting it upwards. Oof, that is a line, I tell you what. Microeconomics is basically the decisions of individual firms, individual actors, firms, and markets. All right, so how the different supplier, buyers, and sellers, those are actors, different firms, those are suppliers, obviously, and then markets, so the market for a certain type of good, how they act and react and interact, and then macroeconomics, macroeconomics is the economy of a nation. Simply put, economy of a nation, right? What does the nation want? What is best for the nation, right? How does the nation, the government as well, right? So we'll add that in here, right? How do they make decisions and things like that? Okay, so micro, small scale, macro, large scale, and government stuff. Government stuff will bleed into here, but for the most part, this is going to be where we see the government stuff, and that is section 1 of of economics. And then the next section is the beginning of microeconomics, which we will do here in a little bit, and I will see you then.